Welcome to PetroNoia, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the energy debate. Hosted by Dan Romito, this show takes complex energy issues, strips away the agendas, and delivers clear fact-based insights. Whether you're an industry expert or simply looking for a balanced perspective, PetroNoia brings clarity to the conversation. Each episode, Dan breaks down key topics, from U.S. energy independence to global policy impacts, focusing on the facts rather than the rhetoric, helping listeners make sense of the energy landscape. This is PetroNoia, where we separate fact from fiction to fuel-informed discussions.
Welcome to PetroNoia. I'm your host, Dan Romito. I'm here with my friend Ann, who is taking this podcast. I think this might be the first time ever from her car. Like, this shows the dedication that Ann has. She's coming fresh out of a board meeting. But as she said, she's used to this. This is her life. So, Ann, I'll while you're in your car, not driving, I don't want to freak anybody out, would love for you to kick off. You have one of the most interesting backgrounds I've heard. You come from this very successful family with your sister. So just why don't you give a quick backdrop of what you're currently doing and how you got here?
Sure. I don't know if it's that interesting, so I'm gonna shorten it. If you find something in there that's worth latching onto, we can dig. But yeah, Ann Bluntzer Pullen. I get the honor of leading the Ham Institute for American Energy. We are at the Oklahoma State University, but clearly are doing work all over the world. And I am typically in different cities most days, and so I love
my being in the car right now.
Yes, exactly. I love what you do with this program, Dan, and I always love hearing your input on important and timely issues. And so, we were talking about rescheduling, and I appreciate your flexibility with our crazy lives. So here we are in my 2016 Land Cruiser that has got a lot of miles on it that I burned. So that's our brilliant background. I'm from Glen Rose, Texas. Went to Texas A&M undergrad and went straight into grad school and joined the Foreign Service. So have my first initial work was in geopolitics and kind of from the diplomatic side, trying to help agriculture communities around the world, kind of highest and best use for their land. While I was a Foreign Service officer, and it is interesting now that my sister is the Secretary of Agriculture and part of President Trump's administration. My twin sister is a middle school principal. My mom was the mayor of our little town, Glen Rose, and is now, I think, the oldest state rep in the state of Texas, and is her encore career in her life is going back to public service, which has been really rewarding to watch. And my dad is a serial entrepreneur in really unique, creative, small town kind of ways. So, I'm really proud of my family. We've all landed in spots that I think we're jobs that we are motivated to be our best at and wake up every day and just kind of grind. We're all grinders. Like, let's do this. Let's conquer the day. Let's give it the most we can. And just happy to be here and try to share a little bit about the Ham Institute and kind of how we're thinking about the challenges in the energy landscape right now.
Yeah, that's a really good segue because, lovingly, when I first heard the Ham Institute, without reading anything, just hearing or seeing the headline, my mind immediately went to, like, here we go, like natural gas. Like, obviously this needs to be discussed. And then when I was fortunate enough to go to the event that y'all had in Oklahoma City, where you had Chris Wright, your sister, Lee Zeldin, obviously Mr. Ham, I mean, I was just blown away by what you guys were able to accomplish in such a short amount of time. And then the rumor was that y'all put together that event in like 4 weeks. Is that true?
Yeah. I think when you end Secretary Burgum, we had 4.
And Burgum was nice.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's indicative of, I love it because it's almost a symbol of how this current administration is conducting business. Like, there is not time to mess around. There is not a lot of time in fault some way to plan like we typically are used to planning in these times of challenges and opportunities, especially in our industry. And so, that's when we could get all those important people in the room and we said, let's do it. I get excited about the opportunity and the crossroads that the energy industry is in right now. I mean, in that room that day and since, we've had 9+ roundtables post that summit to just dig into the work and the suggestions of that day. Every suggestion we got, we followed up with a roundtable, and we are pumping out reports on those from those roundtables. And the people sitting around those tables are CEOs of tech, right? Not only the software folks, but also, the actual builders of these data centers, the utilities, the folks that are actually able to get the power there, the people that are providing the power, the energy companies themselves, and the oil and gas companies, the nuclear companies, the geothermal companies, and then the government people that need to hear what the challenge set is around making all three of those things connect. And so that was the brilliance of that day, certainly, was able to, for the first time, I think we, at this crossroads, are seeing this giant, powerful, amazing tech industry really having to understand what it takes from the power side to be able to bring their dreams and their vision to reality. And it's gonna take more of what we initially thought. I mean, it grows every day, and so it's a wonderful time to be in this business. But unless we can convene the right people in the right room, and this administration moves so fast, we want to make sure these are big opportunities. Let's get them right. And so back to your question, yeah, we surely pulled that thing off. I think in 3.5 weeks, because we had to. We didn't have a choice, right? The challenge is now we need to help pull these voices together to put forward some recommendations that are realistic, and ultimately helpful to them. Like how can we be more helpful? There's not enough people to be able to get the information needed to all these decision makers. So everyone's got to kind of do their part. Everyone has to be a public policy advocate, no matter what sector of the business you're in, or we're not going to get there.
And, taking a quick step back, it certainly takes a distinct personality and capability to run the Ham Institute, particularly because, Harold Ham is Mr. Ham, given what he's been able to accomplish in his career, but bringing all these different entities together where the outcome is very results oriented, very action item focused. Like your path to leading Ham, like how did you get there? Like, what was the conversation like? Does Harold just give you a call, or what did the process actually look like?
I've been working in higher ed, just in the university setting, University of South Carolina, then GCU, and now OSU. But everything that I've been doing in those higher ed communities had something to do with business and land use. And so even in my early days as a professor in a business school, always kind of talking about the impact and the influence of what happens below the ground and above the ground and what it takes to power society. And so that has led to a career, at least in the last 15 years, that has been pretty heavily focused on energy and the crossroads of energy and business and higher ed. And so I got to lead the Energy Institute at TCU, the Ralph Lowe Energy Institute, for many years. And Mr. Ham has been a family friend, but then also he wanted to launch something in Oklahoma that he thought would have more of a global reach. And his number one goal, is how do we ensure that people all over the world have as much energy as they need, and that government should not be getting in the way of that. And it's not just our own government, our local government, or our federal government. There's surely challenges there, but there's a lot of misinformation getting put out into the global sphere of data in regard to, impact, power, environmental. You list the litany of things that have for at least, probably 3 decades put the oil and gas community in a light where they were getting more attention on their negative impact than their positive impact. Almost every energy resource has some kind of negative impact. And And it's just, it's the cost of doing business. And it's how much is there? How much of it can we control? What is the cost of doing business here? If, there's this much more percentage of an emission, let's say, but we're getting times 10 the power at minus 10 the cost, is that cost benefit worth whatever percentage point that is? And then when you really peel the onion back and you start to look at a lot of the other energy resources that are out there, that are considered to be part of a greener, cleaner energy source, and then you really peel back the layers on the supply chain of that and what that looks like, everybody has a little dirt on their fingers. So let's talk about like the positive side of this. Let's talk about the societal impact of what happens when you unleash some of our energy sources to the world. And that's been Mr. Ham's number one priority. Of course, he's, in the oil and gas business and has been for over 5 decades and is, to me, I believe, the most successful oil and gas entrepreneur in the world that's ever existed. And just the way he reinvents and knows what's happening ahead of the time, and his natural instincts and his ability to work with every administration, Democrat or Republican. He's brilliant in that way. And so I get to learn from Matt every day, and really get to be able to try to take those lessons and apply them to how we work at the Institute and how we pick certain projects. And some we have to say no to, some we have to say yes to. But his instincts are so dang good. I listen to him every time. And then we go and we try to make it happen. So he was gracious and just said, listen, I really would like to see what you can come do with my institute up here. And I think you'd enjoy working at OSU, a land grant university. And we both agree the work is everywhere, right? I mean, I'm everywhere. And so it's just been a lot of fun. And that was an easy thing to say yes to and be a part of. And I've just finished 1 year there. I'm right at my 1 year mark.
I can't be, yeah, it seems, I mean this in the best way possible. It seems like you've been there for a really long time, but then again, the Ham Institute is so young. And like you said, it's only been a year. The one thing that I did find just incredibly, well, let's just use the word positive. There's this, when you talk to fossil fuel skeptics or detractors, whatever you want to label them as, they always go back to, the hesitancy of oil and gas to talk about other technologies in terms of like efficiency, reliability, affordability. And to y'all's credit, there seems to be, I don't know if embracing, correct me if that's not the right word, but an acceptance or an acknowledgement of the importance of nuclear. And when I heard the Oklo management team talking at the Ham Institute about how these are complementary, to me at least, there was almost like an inflection point, because you're like, oh yeah, this is no longer a turf war between the merits of oil and gas and nuclear. Like, you see the energy industry overall becoming much more focused on just what's the solution here. Like, we are just beaten over the head on a daily basis with complex problems. That's in our DNA. We know how to solve them. But can you talk about sort of the thought process that goes into talking about the intersection or the connectivity, if you will, or however you want to label it, between nuclear and oil and gas? I thought that was fascinating to hear those executives talk about how they are very much intertwined as opposed to mutually exclusive.
Yeah. I mean, there's some very tactical examples. Then there's things that are just bigger and more symbolic. But, the tactical ones are certainly where we're doing some commingling at the site. And that's very exciting to see, where we know it's going to take a little longer for nuclear to come online. We know that gas is an immediate solution. We see often examples of, peaker plants that we can recalibrate and truly make work and exist and get more power to the grid today. Like, it's literally just adding one steam turbine and you're able to shift a lot of, you're able to get a lot, I say shift the energy amount upward, shift that power upward in what it can produce. And when you start to strategically think about where those existing sites are and where those align, where possible, SMRs, and when they come online, and you set those up to complement each other, that's fantastic, right? That's a tactical example. I think in the bigger play, what we're talking about here is this idea of what is the most realistic and economical energy solution that can truly bring the power to the people in a way that's at the scale that it needs to be at, and not a lot of small independent projects all over the world that are throwing, maybe 1 megawatt here. Like, what do we do to get the gigawatt? Right. And we know now that we need that. And, from what we see, those biggest, bang for your buck, biggest impact power sources are oil and gas, nuclear, and geothermal. And so that's that common thread. That's the more kind of big picture, esoteric, symbolic. Let's pour into these sources. And so that if we're going to ask for permitting reform, if we're going to ask for any kind of federal support, or if we're going to ask for any kind of private capital support, which this industry has been lacking for a really long time. It's just been a year since, you see the hyperscalers coming in and saying, we love nuclear. No, no one was saying that 18 months ago. So, you've got this moment in time where, okay, every bit of our society that's going to grow and move forward and take full advantage of this technology that's in front of us in regard to AI and blockchain, the only way to do that is get the maximum amount of power. And if the government's going to spend money on infrastructure, how do you do that in a way that's being responsible to taxpayer dollars? You get more power than what you've been getting from some of these other sources that, when we were really using a lot of our funds with the IRA going towards some other energy sources that weren't able to produce that level of power. And so we spend our time on those three. There is a place for all energy sources, and I don't think if we start to right now pick winners and losers, that's not doing any of us a favor, because I think there's great technology that can evolve and that will run alongside some of those more intermittent, what I call not firm power energy sources. And if we really figure that out and kind of, lots of ideas around that, but if we put in the right amount of time and energy and resources into the innovative technology that's out there to make all of these energy sources make even more economic and even more efficient, then there's a place for all of it. There really is. But we're going to focus on the ones that, get you the most power to the grid the fastest right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, the other component to that too, I mean, we spend almost a disproportionate amount of time, in my opinion, on the generation. I think the United States can figure that out, to your point, natural gas, nuclear, geothermal, the big three, if you will. But the other component that I think doesn't go as discussed as much, but what I think y'all are doing and certainly putting a spotlight on is transmission and distribution, right? The state of transmission in the United States needs a facelift, so to speak. Yeah. Can you speak to some of the discussions and some of the developments you've been having? And would love to know how the tech bros are thinking about transmission in particular as well.
When we float this idea out at our round tables of, what if we viewed this moment in time as Eisenhower did with the interstate bill, right? What if we looked at kind of a Tennessee Valley Authority approach? What if this was a national security issue and we looked at it that way? And I believe it is. I truly do. I really do. I don't, I'm not trying to dramatize it. I think if we treated it that way, we'd be able to then put the infrastructure in that's needed to really update our grids and obviously, really improve the transmission around the country and all that latency. There's so much room for improvement there. But it's not going to happen in the level we need it to unless there is some real funding, permitting, fast tracking on getting some of this infrastructure in place. And so the tech bros love that, right? I mean, that's great for them. Right now, they're really having to piecemeal this. We're going to put this data center here because there's this existing power and we'll be able to pull this off the grid. And then there's this reserve and it's barely enough to get by. And so there's a real challenge. And one of the studies we're doing right now with our Powering AI Coalition specifically is, okay, let's dream big. Let's say we want 100 data centers on this date by this time in this country. What is the power we are going to need to add to existing load in order to meet that challenge? And we're working backwards from it, and we're moving fast. We're getting this information out to the people that need it, to build that sense of urgency in the next 2 to 3 months. By the end of this fall, we'll have something out for everybody. But pulling all that information, it's going to be critical, because then the tech industry has what they need, right? If they're up there having to talk to, their state governments and their federal government contacts, the senators and the Congress people, to be able to say, here's what it's going to take. And it can't just be them, right? Then it's the utility people, then it's going to be the oil and gas people, and then it's going to be the communities. Yeah. I worry a lot, and really have been trying to spend more time truly thinking about this issue of land rights and eminent domain, because I think we're going to get all these other things that we need with this administration in order to move fast on some of the things that we can move on in regard to permitting reform. But we still got to get the landowner to agree to run the transmission line or the new pipeline.
That's the big thing too. I mean, I think to your point, like what we talk about power, we talk about the tech bros, we talk about energy, like the agricultural aspect of this is so critical. And I think it goes undiscussed. Number one, you have input costs for the farmer just skyrocketing. And so their already thin margins are being compressed even more. I think last year you had, I want to say, if it wasn't a record, it was close to it in terms of just bankruptcies. So the financial state of the farmer is not necessarily where it needs to be, not even close. And given their importance clearly to the overall economy, you got to figure that out. Land rights is not being discussed as much. And then when you talk about agricultural's reliance on the energy sector, even to this day, we still have to sort of connect the dots between like, well, do you want more food? And they're like, yes. Well, do you need more fertilizer? It's like, well, yes. And it's like, well, then you need more natural gas. And they're like, what? Like, can you, I mean, you can go down as far the rabbit hole as you want, but the link between energy and agriculture is something that's not as widely discussed, but it should be. Like, how are you seeing those conversations evolve?
Yeah. I mean, even bring it back to what we just talked about, right? The land rights issue. You take, and there's so much between ag and energy, and Burke and I have fun talking about this, but you just peel it back to one issue, the land rights issue. You have farmers that were told for 10 to 15 years, hey, if you put this solar farm on your property, you are going to make X amount more than you were making farming. And so, you start with that history that the energy industry already has with these farmers. Then you go, where we're at now. Oh, just kidding. Just kidding. Solar's not great. It's covering up the farmland. We're not going to be able to even produce enough food to feed our own country. Never mind. But what we do want to do now is run some, gas pipelines, some, new transmission lines, and we need to run it through the whole place. And we're going to need, a 20-mile easement with this amount and this amount. And, oh, by the way, we're going to have to bring in all these different regulators before we can do that and dig. And yes, there'll be this disruption, but, oh, you're going to get paid this. Isn't that worth it? And so we're missing the boat on number one. First of all, need to assume these are some of our smartest, most intelligent business people in our country, is the agriculture industry and the farmers. They have been doing this for centuries, and their family trades have just been passed down, and they have, more than any industry, have adopted technology faster than anyone, faster than, the farming agriculture community in the United States are always the early adopters to technology. And so, we've not done a good job. Like right now, our energy industry, I think, has done a disservice to ag in a way that we haven't been honest about, solar, wind, all the impacts on renewable energy. There's a lot of good in renewable energy, But when you talk about ag and environmental impacts, no one really talked about that. We were so worried about emissions, we kind of forgot about all the other external impacts. So we started off on a bad foot with the farmers in that way, and now we're asking them to come and do this. And they are our largest landowners in the country, and it's going to take everybody to get this infrastructure. And so it's almost become an issue of how do we talk about this in almost a patriotic way, where it's going to take some folks sacrificing on some things that they don't want to, and don't, because they haven't been treated well in the past, right? Now they've got solar panels for acres and miles on this farmland that isn't producing what they told what it was going to produce. And, it's tough. It's a tough time to be, to be in the ag industry right now, and really trying to figure out how to maximize that. You've got the energy sector that, is looking like it's going to be the hero in this AI race if we can figure it out and get it right. We're the linchpin. And so, we've got to figure out how to get the power to the people. But I think we will. And then we're the people that are able to do that. But we can't do it without partnerships with landowners. And that's the farming community in the United States.
How does the tech community in the discussions that you're having with them, like, how do they view that? Like, you hear all these different stories, right? You have this stuff going on in Nevada where I think it's Amazon is just building like these massive facilities. You have Microsoft with 3 Mile Island. You have a variety of just technologies that are trying to be developed internally or with geothermal. Like, if you had your crystal ball, like how do you see this playing out? Like, what is the end result in terms of like this blueprint for success?
I love the word blueprint. I actually try to always think in that way. I don't want to waste time on things unless we can actually put a plan together that's going to be helpful for someone to build off of. So I love that term. I mean, I think we're going to figure it out. The tech community, for the first time, is saying we need natural gas. Like, we get it. Like, this, okay. Maybe we were right on some things over the past few years and going so heavy into, some of the green initiatives, but we were also probably wrong on shortchanging the ingenuity and the ability for oil and gas to bring power to the grid in the way that it does so efficiently and affordably. And now cleaner than ever, literally ever. And so, I think we need each other mutually. It's a great time for the energy sector to get this kind of exposure. We haven't had it. Kind of feel like we've been taken advantage of for so many years. And so now that everybody's got their phone and wants to, use, a much more advanced, AI tool than we've ever seen before, and what that's going to take to be able for people to utilize that, they kind of have to have us. And so it's actually been a really, rewarding and, just very inspiring conversations, interactions, meetings I've had with all of the major tech companies, and they are open, they are listening, they are being supportive, they are joining our coalitions, and it's a good time to see, these two different major sectors come together and work together. So I'm optimistic, and they are too. They're not being difficult at all about, or picky about, where their energy is coming from.
Right.
Like,
They just want to be reliable. When you take your talents international, like, are those perspectives slightly different? I know, for example, I gave a speech. It's going on 3 years now. I mean, time's flying, and it was in Amsterdam, and just the pushback I received from natural gas, it was actually eye-opening to me. It was somewhat depressing, but also, wow, like, I would have never guessed. I knew obviously the EU had a different take on emissions management and decarbonization and net zero, but I didn't know it was like literally to that extent. And then you see over the last couple of years, Germany going from wind to nuclear to coal, right? And then, so, you have a real interesting and incredibly centered vantage point from like how this is evolving internationally. is it playing out similar to what we see in the United States, or are they still is
Yes,
the EU with the
yes. I mean, yes, in that they are having to take a few steps backwards in what they think, in what they had laid out as a plan and where their energy, consumption was going to come from, what the sources were. And so backwards might be the wrong word, but they definitely are having to rethink, recalibrate, resubmit, republish reports. The IEA just yesterday came out and backtracked on a lot of that. So, I think those are huge signals out to the global marketplace that okay, we have to really be more realistic about this, and we can't put forth ideological goals that were based on something that we believed where the energy consumption should go, not where it is and how it's going to get there. They just weren't necessarily always based in reality. And so you're starting to see that. And we talk and work with a lot of major international companies, and they still have very strong commitments to climate. And they're not going to back off of that. And I think that's the right thing to do. It's this perfect storm, and no one's talking about this. And I'm going to call more attention. I'm at multiple international conferences over the next few weeks, and this is going to be, part of my messaging is, all right, we can finally actually say we can do both and mean it. You can have these goals. You can't form policy around it, and you can't force a consumer to pay more for their energy because this is what you think is the correct and most environmentally friendly thing to do. And still not having realistic conversations about the cost of some of these energy transition sources and what the real long-term impacts are. And so being able to really have a free market approach again to how the rest of the world is consuming energy. You've got Japan talking about nuclear again for the first time in, a very long time. And so it's not just an oil and gas, it's not just an oil and gas pity party over here. I mean, it's a lot of energy sources that have been misconstrued on what their impact is. And I think you're finally starting to see a reality check. And I'm sensing that everywhere. And I'm loving that they're actually not backing off of their climate goals. They can still have those, and oil and gas, natural gas can still be, their primary provider, and they are still going to meet their climate goals. So they're finally starting to figure out, okay, this is the real formula, and we can do both.
Do you think that momentum is, I mean, worst case scenario, let's say that the outcome of the midterm elections next year put the Senate or the House back in the hands of Democrats. Do you think this momentum wanes, or do you think that it's become such common sense and such an understanding that this is the best path forward economically that the midterms become inconsequential, or how are you viewing that dynamic?
I think, well, I would say yes to both of those things. I think the midterms are not inconsequential. I think that should light a fire under everybody that we have to do even more to make sure that this message is getting out and take advantage of this moment right now, to 10 times what we're doing right now in regard to talking about the importance of some of these energy sources and what that does for people's quality of life around the world. Possibly what I don't like about a possible midterm shift is what that could mean for the really, really good work that's happening right now with permitting reform at the federal level, and it's calling attention to it at every state. And so that makes me, nervous, just because that these things are going to take a couple cycles to really. We'll be able to do some immediate things, but some of the stuff that really needs to happen is going to take a couple cycles. So, that part worries me. That momentum will be lost. But I mean, that's every administration faces that, So, yeah, I think both those things are true. I regret that we got to be close to the end here, but I want to hear from you. I'm doing all the talking. I'm curious what you think on the international flip, and you're hearing and talking to a lot of folks.
Yeah. Internationally, it's a little bit weird, right? I do think the EU is slowly realizing that it's a natural gas and nuclear story, I see a lot of good work being done on the advocacy front of the EU. Where I inherently get frustrated is that, instead of just allowing debate and free ideas just to flow, you still have in the EU this anchoring to like a fixation on net zero, right? And I think the EU has to acknowledge that, organically speaking, so to speak, that attaining net zero is impossible. You attain net zero by turning off the economy. What you should be doing is providing much more carrots, in my opinion, to pursue pragmatic decarbonization. Those are two different things. Like, you can decarbonize your economy and still grow your economy. Case in point, the United States. I don't like the EU regulating, let's call it certified gas. I think that should be a competitive thing. Like, if you want certified gas, you should put yourself in a position to pay for premium. In every other walk of life, in a free market economy, that's what premium means. You pay more for it. So I do see technologies moving towards much better data. I do think we overall need better data in the place, because I think outside of the environmental place, who cares for a hot second about environmental considerations? If everything is going towards artificial intelligence, your inputs are only, or your outputs are only good as your inputs, as the cliche goes. So you just need better, more reliable, more trustworthy data to plug into the algorithm. And that can't be a function of what we put into a subpart W spreadsheet. But yeah, I could go on for that. I know you have to hop in. Thank you so much. You set a new standard here on putting yourself in the car to take the call. I probably the most important question I have for you is, what's the post game celebration like when TCU smokes Belichick's first game as a coach at UNC?
It was fantastic. I will tell you, dude. It was awesome. I'm pulled in so many directions in this football world right now. So many, allegiances with certain universities all over for different reasons. And so it's been fun to watch, but man, it's nice when there was only a 3-point spread, and that's where it ends up being, and the national attention it got. It's just, it was a lot of fun.
Well, we almost turned the game off, right? I mean, UNC comes and scores in their first drive. You're like, oh my God, this is gonna be a bloodbath. And then
I know.
20 minutes later, you're like, wait a second, it is a bloodbath, but the other way around. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I know you have to hop. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have to get you on again, but I really want to thank you for your time and perspective. It's been amazing.
Oh yeah.